I think it started, art therapies, officially started probably in the 1950s, 1940s, where it was found to be useful as a means of diagnosis. I mean, there are things you can see in artwork when you're a trained professional that might lead you to ask pertinent questions. With some severe mental illness is absolutely visible in artwork, such as schizophrenia. Somebody has bipolar disorder, you could probably see that in the artwork. Depression, you might speculate. Sometimes when you look at artwork, it's not certain that it doesn't relate one-to-one to any diagnosis, but it leads you to ask questions about about a person's state of mind. And then the process of creating art is therapeutic. It's like somebody is anxious, for example, it really is helpful when they have sort of controlled media where they have control, like pencils, something very, markers, for example, would be helpful. There is, and as a therapist, you would sort of choose to lead a client to use certain art materials that you think might be therapeutic. And as art therapists, we're trained in, it's actually a psychology training. We're studied psychology, but we learn to use art as a means of diagnosis and treatment.
A lot of us have worked a lot with clients who have, complex trauma in different ways. And when you think about trauma, a lot of it is situated in different parts of our brain where it either lives in our body or it lives in visual images in our brain. So sometimes talking about that is very difficult, whether that's in English or a different language, and being able to express that in a nonverbal way really helps work with those images and contain them, reintegrate them, in ways that verbal psychotherapy can't always access.
I worked several years ago with a boy who just arrived from a refugee camp in Thailand, and he started drawing massacres for months. Every time I saw him, there was another massacre of soldiers shooting at women and children, burning down villages, and he could express his experiences, or I think it was a lot of what he has heard, not necessarily actually seen, but his whole family was traumatized. But he could not at that time talk about it because he didn't speak any English. And he gradually worked through this imagery, and by repeatedly drawing it, he kind of worked through the experience itself. And as he worked through the traumatic experiences, his artwork changed. He eventually drew superheroes who actually bashed the soldiers.
The superhero thing reminded me one last thing. I don't know if you've taken pictures of all the art, but there's a lot of mermaid drawings, and that's something that I also have found over the past 9 years of working with refugees, that these ideas of superheroes or mermaids or zombies come up a lot, and I know that that's with most kids, so that's not just newcomers clearly, but one student wrote a story about a mermaid where she talked about living in the water and wanting to be on the ground, but her parents were in the water and her friends were on the ground. She wrote this beautiful story that just so perfectly described the refugee experience. So really just, even through the imagery, these kids are telling their stories, even maybe if they don't actively know it. It's really beautiful.